Poverty and Political Engagement in Tanzania, a further analysis by Las Vegas. Our research will attempt to examine what factors might influence the relationship between poverty and political engagement. To this end, we will use survey research from the Afrobarometer 0506 dataset, with a sample size of 1277 respondents from Tanzania. We will use the tools of correlation, regression analysis, and hierarchical regression with a focus on R-squared and adjusted R-squared values, as well as B and beta.
Our dependent variable measuring political engagement is an index we created and used for previous research. The Cronbach's alpha score of 0.6723 shows its reliability. In order to measure poverty, we use the following indicator that measures how often the respondent or someone in their family had gone without a cash income. Our hypothesis was that the poorer the respondent, the less politically engaged they would be. This hypothesis is supported by Mbaya Kankwenda and others who say that one key way to increase political engagement in the developing world is to increase wealth. Furthermore, many studies have shown that in the West, political engagement is strongly correlated to financial security.
Our research into this topic is justified primarily because in our previous cross-tabulation research, studying factors that affected political engagement, we could find no association between poverty and political engagement. We decided to use further statistical analysis to try and tease apart this lack of relationship, since the literature suggests there should be some association here. Our first attempt to confirm or deny the presence of a relationship was to perform a correlation analysis. As you can see, the correlation showed that the relationship was not statistically significant, or would it have explained much of a variance in the dependent variable.
We therefore moved on to regression analysis. Again, we can see that although the regression holistically explained 4.8% of the variance, the relationship between engagement and poverty was not statistically significant. We then turned to the literature to try to find some factor that might explain the lack of apparent relationship between the two. The two that we found were age and gender. In Tanzania, political involvement is based on strongly patriarchal lines, according to Mark Blackton and Magdalena Ribengera, and therefore it would control for both age and gender using dummy variables. We might find that there is a supposed relationship between poverty and political involvement. We hypothesize that due to suppression, controlling for age for those in the 41 to 75 year age bracket, the more financially secure the respondent, the more likely they will be politically engaged. And controlling for gender, for women, the more financially secure the respondent, the more likely they will be politically engaged.
Our first model in this graph confirms what we found in our first regression, that the relationship between poverty and involvement is not statistically significant, and that it only accounts for 0.15% of the variance. Our second model controls for age, incorporating the effects of adult and elder respondents as opposed to youth. As we can see, the beta value for poverty increases marginally, while both the adult and elder variables have a far higher beta values, suggesting that they have individual effects on political engagement. Furthermore, the adjusted R-squared value suggests that the new regression equation explains approximately 7% of the variance in the dependent variable.
Likewise, we can see that on its own, poverty has very little effect on the engagement. However, in this case, we can see that the beta value, once gender is controlled for, is even lower than for poverty on its own, suggesting partial explanation. However, once again, the R-squared value shows that once gender is controlled for, the new regression equation accounts for about 8.3% of the variance in the dependent variable.
What we have found in both cases is that the R-squared value in the second model, once our additional dependent variables are taken into account, are much higher than in the first value when we are only witnessing the effect of poverty on political involvement. However, we have not proved that there is any suppression taking place. In our first attempt at hierarchical regression, with the introduction of gender, the relationship between poverty and involvement got even weaker as it was previously, from a beta value of 0.046 to 0.044, while in our second analysis, incorporating age, the beta value increased only slightly, but not enough to allow us to assume an influential relationship between the two. Although this discounts our initial hypotheses, it does provide some useful information that we can use to come to some conclusions. We conclude that both age and gender are better indicators to measure variance in political involvement. This is further proven by the B-values for both analyses. The B-value of poverty shows that political involvement depends on very little on poverty despite controlling for gender. However, we can also see that controlling for the effects of poverty, females are less likely than males by half a category to politically involved. Likewise, when controlling for age, poverty still has very little effect on political involvement. Yet adults, 26 to 40 years, exhibit a 0.3 of a category higher involvement than youths, 18 to 25 years, and elders, 41 to 75 years, another 0.3 of a category higher than adults. In addition, we we can see that the resultant R-squared and adjusted R-squared values from our hierarchical regression analysis are higher than the original regression analysis, suggesting that gender and age are better independent variables than not only poverty but education and affiliation with the political party as well. In order to prove this, we ran a new multivariate regression including only gender and age.
The R-squared value shows that this new regression equation explains a little over 13% of the variance in our dependent variable. This confirms that what we witnessed in our previous regression was not suppression, but distortion that led to a better understanding of the factors that influence political involvement in Tanzania. In conclusion, we can make the following observations: that both age and gender are better indicators than poverty with which to measure the variance of political involvement. They are also better than the variables of education and affiliation with a political party. This is somewhat in line with the literature, in that it confirms the importance of age as an indicator of respect, wisdom, and superior political status in communities, as mentioned by Blackton and Migera, as well as the patriarchal nature of Tanzanian politics, mentioned by Same. However, it departs from the literature as well, in that we still have been unable to discover a meaningful relationship between poverty and political engagement.